The cologne hit Adaeze like a punch to the chest. Aqua di Gio. Her breath caught. Her coffee cup trembled in her hand. No. It couldn't be. She turned slowly, scanning the crowd at Incheon Airport's arrival hall. Travelers rushed past with luggage carts. Families reunited with tears and laughter. Business people in sharp suits marched toward taxis. And then she saw him. Park Eugene. Her dead husband. Alive. Walking through the domestic arrivals gate from a Seoul flight, a carry-on bag slung over his shoulder, laughing at something on his phone. The same easy smile. The same way he ran his hand through his hair when he was relaxed. The same man who had died in her arms 3 years ago. Except he wasn't dead. He was very much alive. And he wasn't alone. A woman walked beside him, Korean, beautiful, and heavily pregnant. 8 months along at least. Her hand rested on her swollen belly. Eugene's hand covered hers, protective and intimate. The kind of touch that said mine. Adeeze's coffee cup slipped from her fingers. It shattered on the polished floor, hot liquid splashing across her shoes, but she didn't feel it. Didn't hear it. Didn't see the people turning to stare. All she could see was him. The man she'd buried. The man she'd mourned. The man who'd left her drowning in 50 million won of debt while she scraped together money for his funeral flowers. And now he was here. In Seoul. With another woman. And a baby on the way. Her vision blurred. Her knees weakened. No. No, this isn't real. This is a nightmare. Wake up. Wake up. But when she blinked, he was still there. Still laughing. Still touching that woman's belly like it held his entire world. The memory crashed over her before she could stop it. 3 years ago. Their apartment in Gangnam. 2 a.m. Adaeze lay beneath Eugene, their bodies slick with sweat, the sheets tangled around their legs. His weight pressed her into the mattress. Familiar, comforting, right. Seoul's city lights filtered through the curtains, painting stripes of gold across his back as he moved above her. Inside her. His rhythm was slow, deliberate, like he was savoring every second. Like he was memorizing the way she felt. Sarangi, he whispered against her neck, his breath hot on her skin. I love you. Eugene. Her voice broke as pleasure coiled tight in her belly. His hand slid up her thigh, gripping her hip hard enough to leave marks. His other hand tangled in her braids, tilting her head back so he could claim her mouth. The kiss was deep, desperate, almost violent in its intensity. Like he was trying to brand himself into her soul. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him deeper. Her nails raked down his back, drawing a groan from his throat that vibrated against her lips. Adaeze, he breathed her name like a prayer, his hips snapping harder now, faster. Nay sarang. My love. She arched beneath him, gasping as the pressure built and Eugene. Oh God. He swallowed her cry with another kiss, his hand sliding between their bodies to where they were joined, fingers finding that sensitive bundle of nerves, and she shattered. Her entire body seized, pleasure crashing through her in waves so intense she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but feel him. Every thrust, every kiss, every whispered word in Korean she didn't fully understand but felt in her bones. He followed moments later, his face buried in the curve of her neck, her name torn from his lips as he trembled against her. Sarangi, he said again, softer this time. Broken. Sarangi, Sarangi, Sarangi. They lay tangled together afterward, his arms wrapped around her like he'd never let go. His heartbeat thundered against her cheek. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her spine. She'd never felt safer. She'd never felt more loved. Eugene, she whispered into the darkness. Promise me something. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Anything. Promise you'll never leave me. There was a pause. Too long. She felt his chest hitch, like he'd stopped breathing. Then, I promise. His voice sounded strange. Thick. like he was choking on the words. But she was too drowsy, too sated, too wrapped up in the warmth of him to notice. She fell asleep in his arms. When she woke at 5 a.m., the bed was cold. Eugene. Silence. She sat up, pulling the sheet around her naked body. Eugene. The bathroom light was on. The door slightly ajar. She padded across the room, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. Babe, are you? The scream died in her throat. Eugene lay collapsed on the bathroom floor, his skin ashen, his eyes open and unseeing. Foam at the corners of his mouth. Not breathing. Present day. Eugene. Adaeze's voice ripped through the airport terminal, raw and desperate. He stopped walking. The pregnant woman beside him looked up, confused. Eugene turned. And for one agonizing second, their eyes met across the crowded arrivals hall. She saw it, the flicker of recognition, the widening of his eyes, the flash of panic. He knew her. He saw her. But then his expression smoothed into something blank, polite, stranger-like. He looked at her the way you'd look at someone who'd mistaken you for someone else. And then he turned away, put his arm around the pregnant woman's shoulders, kept walking. Like she didn't exist. Like she'd never existed. Adaeze stood frozen in the middle of the terminal, people flowing around her like water around a stone. Someone was asking if she was okay. A janitor appeared with a mop for the spilled coffee. But she couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't process what she'd just seen. He's alive. He's alive and he looked right through me. He's alive and he has a wife and a baby and... Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her friend, Chisholm. Where are you? I've been waiting at the coffee shop for 20 minutes. Adaeze blinked. Right. She'd come to the airport to meet Chisholm, who was picking up a package from a friend arriving from Busan. She'd come here by coincidence. Pure, cruel coincidence. She looked toward the exit where Eugene had disappeared. The Genesis SUV was pulling away from the curb. She could just make out his silhouette in the passenger seat. Without thinking, she raised her phone and snapped a photo of the license plate. Her hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries. But she got it. Hey you. Yeah, you right there. If you are brand new to K-Whisper TV, welcome. Seriously. We are so glad you are here. This channel is built on stories exactly like this one. Drama, tension, love that refuses to die. And we are pushing hard to hit 3,000 subscribers. Every single sub counts. If this story is pulling you in, if you are feeling what Adaeze is feeling right now, hit that subscribe button. Tell a friend. Share the link. Help us grow. And if you are a returning audience, if you have been here from the start, if you have watched us build this from the ground up, then you already know what to do. Drop a comment. Tell us where in the world you are watching from. Wherever you are, we want to know. The comment section is where this community lives. And every single one of you watching from across the globe is the reason this channel is what it is. Let's get to 3K. Together. Now, back to the story. 3 years of crying herself to sleep. 3 years of working 3 jobs to pay off debts that weren't even hers. 3 years of loan sharks showing up at her mother's house in Lagos, threatening, demanding. 3 years of believing the man she loved had died in her arms. And he'd been alive the whole time. Alive. Married. Happy. She followed them. She kept her distance, 30 feet, 40 feet, enough that he wouldn't turn and see her again if he glanced back. But close enough to watch. The pregnant woman was talking, animated, one hand gesturing as she told some story. Eugene listened with that expression she knew so well. Eyebrows slightly raised, the ghost of a smile at the corner of his mouth, his full attention hers. He was good at that. He had always been good at that. Making you feel like the only person in the room. Outside, the Seoul evening was cool and damp, the sky bruised purple and grey. A black Genesis SUV idled at the curb. Eugene opened the passenger door for the woman, waited while she eased herself in with the careful, deliberate movements of someone very pregnant, then closed it gently behind her. Adeeze's phone was already in her hand. She raised it, framed the license plate, took the photo with fingers that would not stop shaking no matter how hard she pressed them against the glass. The SUV pulled away from the curb and merged into the river of Seoul traffic, red taillights bleeding into the dusk like an open wound. Adaeze stood on the pavement outside Incheon Airport, phone clutched to her chest, and said the words to no one. I mourned you. I fucking mourned you. The Goshawan room was small enough that Adaeze could touch both walls if she stretched out her arms. She lay on the mattress, a thin, slightly damp thing on a wooden platform barely wide enough for one person, and stared at the ceiling, which was close enough to touch without sitting up. The fluorescent strip light buzzed and flickered overhead. Outside, Mapogu was doing what Mapogu always did at midnight, living loudly, carelessly, without shame. Music from a noribang leaked through the walls. Someone was arguing in rapid Korean 3 rooms down. A motorbike screamed past on the street below. Adaeze heard none of it. She turned onto her side, then her back, then her other side. The sheets were too warm. The room was too small. Her skin felt electric, oversensitive, like every nerve ending had been rewired in the last 6 hours to receive signals she didn't want to receive. Her body remembered him. That was the worst part. Not the shock, though the shock was still there, a deep, rattling tremor somewhere beneath her ribs, like an aftershock that wouldn't stop. Not the rage, though the rage was building, slow and white-hot, climbing her throat like acid. The worst part was the way her body had simply recognized him. The way, in the split second before her mind caught up, before the reality of what she was seeing had fully registered, something deep and cellular had lurched toward him like a compass needle swinging north. 6 months into the marriage. Their bathroom. 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. The shower was hot. Too hot. The kind of heat that turned the bathroom into a sauna and fogged up every surface until the world outside the glass was nothing but a blur of white. Adeeze's back was against the tile, cool and smooth against her spine, and Eugene was pressed against her front, one arm braced against the wall beside her head, the other hand. God, that hand. Her leg was hitched over his hip. The angle was deep and deliberate and made her breath catch every time he moved, which was slow, achingly slow, like he was savoring something. You're so beautiful, he murmured against her temple. His English was still rough around the edges back then, charming in a way that made her chest tight, and he said it with such simple, open sincerity that it didn't sound like a line. It sounded like an observation, a fact he had noticed and felt compelled to state. The water was going cold. Neither of them cared. He pulled back just enough to look at her, water streaming down his face, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes heavy and soft in a way that made her feel simultaneously exposed and absolutely safe. Like he could see every part of her and wanted all of it. That was the thing about Eugene in those days. The thing that had made her fall so fast and so completely that she hadn't even seen it coming. He looked at her like she was extraordinary. Not in the way men sometimes looked at beautiful women, appraising, calculating, already planning the next move. He looked at her the way you look at something that has genuinely surprised you. Something that has made the world bigger just by existing in it. She hadn't known then how much of it was real. Adaeze sat up. She pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes until she saw stars, and breathed, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way the therapist she'd seen once in Lagos had taught her before she couldn't afford to go back. Stop it, she whispered to the empty room. Stop. Her body did not stop. But her mind, at least, could be redirected. She reached for her phone. The license plate photo was still on her screen. Clear, well-lit, unmistakable. She stared at it for a long moment, then opened her messages and typed a number she hadn't contacted in weeks. Chidinma's boyfriend, Jae-soo. He worked for a delivery company that contracted with half the logistics firms in Seoul. He had access to vehicle registration databases. Not legally exactly, but not illegally either, in the gray, sliding scale way that information moved in a city this size. She sent the photo with a single line. Who owns this car? The reply came back in 11 minutes. Park Ji-won. Age 31. Gangnam address. Luxury building. The new one on Tehran RO. Car registered 2 years ago. Adaeze read the name 3 times. Park Ji-won. She opened Instagram. Typed the name into the search bar. Found the account immediately. Public, heavily curated. The kind of feed that told a story as carefully as any piece of fiction. At Jiwon_mama. The first thing Adaeze saw was a wedding photo. Ji-won in white, radiant and laughing, leaning into the arm of a man in a dark suit. The man was smiling. The man was Park Eugene. Except the caption didn't say Eugene. The caption said Sungmin. Park Sungmin. A different name. A new name. A name he had built a whole new life around while Adaeze was drowning in the ruins of the old one. She scrolled. Wedding photos. A pregnancy announcement 7 months ago. A flat lay of sonogram pictures and a pair of tiny white baby socks, captioned with hearts. Couple photos at restaurants, at the beach, at what looked like a high-end department store. In every single one, Eugene, Sungmin, was smiling. Relaxed. Present. The picture of a man with everything he wanted. 3 days ago, back in Seoul for family reasons. Sungmin's father passed. Heavy hearts. A single black heart emoji. The funeral. He had come back for his father's funeral. Adaeze set the phone down on her chest and did the math. Eugene died 3 years ago. Ji-won married him 2 years ago. Which meant he had waited exactly 1 year, 12 months, after faking his own death and abandoning Adaeze to marry someone else. 12 months while Adaeze was in Lagos, broke, terrified, fielding threats from loan sharks who showed up at her mother's gate with hard eyes and harder voices and told her exactly what they would do if the money didn't come. He had been in Korea the entire time. Alive. Safe. Building a new life like a man laying bricks. The rage, when it came, was so clean and so complete that it felt almost calm. Like stepping into very cold water, a total body shock that wiped everything else away, left nothing but clarity. She picked up the phone again. Opened Ji-won's Instagram stories. Posted 2 hours ago. A photo of a hospital corridor, slightly blurry, clearly taken in a hurry. The caption. Baby coming early. Prayers appreciated. A prayer hands emoji. Samsung Medical Center. Tagged in the location. He would be there. At the hospital. Waiting. While Ji-won was in labor, he would be alone in some waiting area, pacing, checking his phone. She knew which hospital. She knew where he would be. She knew exactly how to find him. Now she needed to look the part. Adaeze crossed the tiny room in 2 steps and opened the single narrow wardrobe. Most of what hung inside was practical. The black trousers and white blouses she wore to work, a denim jacket, a cardigan. But at the very back, wrapped in a dry cleaning bag she had never opened, was the red dress. The fitting room at Lotte department store. 8 months into the marriage. Eugene was behind her, his breath warm against the back of her neck, his fingers working the zip at the back of the dress she'd just tried on. The blue one, the safe one, the one she'd picked because it was pretty without being too much. "Try this one," he'd whispered, and draped something over the hook beside her. A flash of deep arterial red, the kind of color that made you look twice. She'd reached for it. His hand caught hers. "Let me." His fingers found the zip of the blue dress again. Slowly this time, deliberately, tracing the line of her spine as the fabric loosened and fell. His mouth found her shoulder. Then her collarbone. The press of his lips was barely there, featherlight, but it sent a current through her skin that made her shiver. "Eugene," she whispered, glancing toward the curtain. "Someone will." "Let them," he murmured, and his voice had that roughness in it, that particular low register that meant his composure was slipping, that the careful, polite exterior he wore in public was fraying at the edges. His hand slid forward, skimming beneath the fallen fabric of the blue dress, fingertips tracing a path across her ribs that made her breath stutter. Adaeze pulled the red dress from the wardrobe and held it up in the buzzing fluorescent light. The fabric was smooth under her fingers. The color was still deep and vivid, unfaded, like a bruise that refused to heal. She held it against herself and looked at her reflection in the dark phone screen. War paint. She dressed slowly, deliberately, the way a soldier arms herself before a battle. The red dress. The gold earrings Eugene had given her for their first anniversary. The ones she'd almost thrown away a dozen times and never had. A thin layer of makeup, lips dark, eyes sharp, everything else left clean and unadorned. She looked at herself one last time in the cracked mirror above the hot plate. She looked like the woman Eugene had fallen in love with. She looked like a weapon. Let's see if you recognize me now, husband. Samsung Medical Center at 9 p.m. on a weeknight was quiet in the way that hospitals are always quiet. Not silent, exactly, but muffled. Padded. The footsteps were soft on the polished floors. The lighting was warm and indirect. Somewhere, a machine beeped in a steady metronomic rhythm that sounded almost like a heartbeat. Adaeze walked through the main entrance like she belonged there. Shoulders back. Chin level. The red dress moved against her legs as she walked, and she felt the eyes of the security guard at the front desk track her for a moment before sliding away again. She didn't stop. She didn't sign in. She simply walked, with the quiet confidence of someone who had somewhere to be, toward the maternity wing on the 4th floor. The elevator doors opened onto a corridor that smelled of antiseptic and something softer underneath. Baby powder, maybe, or the particular clean warmth of newborn skin. Adaeze stepped out and scanned the space. There he was. He was in the waiting area at the end of the corridor. A small alcove of beige chairs and a water cooler and a vending machine that glowed with the blue-white light of its display. He was pacing. Phone in one hand, the other hand running repeatedly through his hair. A gesture she recognized from 1,000 mornings in their kitchen, from 100 nights lying beside him in the dark. He was wearing a dark gray suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone. He looked older than she remembered. A little thinner. There was gray at his temples now, just a thread of it, and the lines around his eyes were deeper, more permanent. He looked tired. He looked stressed. He looked in that moment entirely human, and the sight of him so close, so real, so alive, made something crack open inside Adaeze's chest that she immediately slammed shut again. She sat down. 3 seats away from him. Close enough to be noticed, far enough to maintain the fiction that she was simply another person waiting. She picked up a magazine from the table beside her, something in Korean, the cover showing a woman in a white dress on a beach, and opened it to a random page. She did not look at him. She waited. It took 45 seconds. She counted them. She felt his gaze first, the way you feel sunlight on skin, a physical warmth, a shift in the quality of the air. His eyes moved over her slowly, casually at first, the way you scan a waiting room, and then they stopped. She felt the exact moment he registered the dress. Felt the sharp, involuntary intake of breath that followed. A small sound, barely audible, but in the hushed corridor it was enough. She turned a page of the magazine. Did not look up. What are you doing here? His voice was low, tight, controlled in a way that told her he was not, in fact, controlled at all. She kept her eyes on the magazine. Kept her expression bored, uninterested, the face of a woman killing time. Visiting a friend. You. He moved closer. She heard the soft scrape of his shoes on the floor, felt the displacement of air as he sat down in the chair beside her. Not the one directly next to her, but the one after that, close enough that their knees were almost touching. Close enough that the scent of him filled the space between them like smoke. Aqua di Gio. Adaeze. His voice dropped lower. You need to leave. Now. She turned another page. Let the silence sit for exactly 3 beats before she looked up. Slowly, deliberately, meeting his eyes with a calm so total it felt almost dangerous. Leave. Like you left me. Like you left me with 50 million won in debt and a funeral for a man who wasn't even dead. The color drained from his face in real time. She watched it happen, the way the blood retreated from his cheeks, his lips, leaving him pale beneath his tan. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to the left, to the right, scanning for witnesses. Keep your voice down. Or what? She leaned forward, just slightly, and let her voice stay exactly where it was. Quiet, steady, lethal. Your wife will hear. The one who's about to give birth to your child while I'm still legally married to you. Something broke behind his eyes. Not guilt, not yet. Fear. Pure animal fear, the kind that strips a person down to nothing. We're not. The marriage was annulled. Adaeze reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone. She had the photo ready, their marriage certificate, scanned and saved months ago by the Korean lawyer who had contacted her, back when she'd still believed the settlement was real. She turned the screen toward him and held it there, steady, unhurried. Was it? Because I never signed anything. Which means you're a bigamist. The word landed like a stone dropped into still water. She watched the ripples spread across his face. Shock, then calculation, then something that looked a lot like surrender. What do you want? His voice was barely a whisper. The truth. She didn't blink. All of it. Or I walk into that delivery room and tell G1 everything. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The vending machine hummed. Somewhere down the corridor, a door opened and closed. Then a nurse appeared at the entrance to the alcove, a small woman in blue scrubs, clipboard in hand, her voice bright and efficient in the way of people who do this work every day. Park Sung-min SSI. Your wife is asking for you. You can come in now. He stood. Slowly, like a man moving underwater. He looked at Adaeze, and in his eyes she saw something she hadn't expected. Something that looked, just for a fraction of a second, like relief. Like being caught was the thing he had been waiting for all along. Cafe, he said, low and urgent. Downstairs. 20 minutes. I'll explain everything. Adaeze held his gaze for one beat. 2. You have 15. He turned and followed the nurse down the corridor without looking back. She watched him go, watched the set of his shoulders, the slight forward lean of his body, the way he moved with that same quiet, contained energy she had fallen in love with 4 years ago in a different life. Then he disappeared around the corner, and she was alone in the beige chairs with the buzzing vending machine and the steady metronomic beeping of the machines, and her hands were shaking so badly she had to press them flat against her thighs to make them stop. Not from fear. From fury. And something else. Something older and deeper and far more dangerous than fury. Something she hated herself for feeling. She still wanted him. The cafe on the ground floor of Samsung Medical Center was the kind of place designed to make people feel slightly less terrible about being in a hospital. Soft lighting. Wooden tables. The smell of espresso and something sweet baking somewhere out of sight. At this hour, it was nearly empty. A couple in the corner, both staring at their phones, and an elderly man reading a newspaper with the focused intensity of someone who had been doing it for 60 years. Adaeze sat at a table near the back wall, where the light was dim and the angle meant no one could easily see their faces from the entrance. She ordered a black coffee she didn't intend to drink and waited. He showed up in 12 minutes. He crossed the cafe without looking at anyone, pulled out the chair across from her, and sat down. He didn't order anything. He didn't speak. He just sat there, hands flat on the table, staring at them like they belonged to someone else. Up close, in the warmer light of the cafe, she could see the details she'd missed in the airport. The faint shadows under his eyes, the way his jaw was clenched so tightly the muscle there twitched, the slight tremor in his fingers that he was clearly trying to will into stillness. He looked, she thought, like a man who hadn't slept properly in a very long time. Talk, she said. He looked up, drew a breath. And then he told her. It was my mother's plan. Adaeze stared at him. What? The marriage. The debts. All of it. His voice was flat. Rehearsed, almost like he had gone over this in his head 1,000 times and was finally saying it out loud. My mother planned it. From the beginning. He told her about his family. Old money, the kind that had been accumulating for generations. the kind that came with expectations and obligations, and a set of unspoken rules so deeply embedded in the family's DNA that breaking them felt less like rebellion and more like amputation. His mother was the architect of everything, the keeper of the family name, the woman who decided, with quiet, absolute authority, what was acceptable and what was not. A black woman was not acceptable. A foreign wife was not acceptable. Adaeze, with her Lagos accent and her Nigerian passport and her skin that was beautiful and dark and wrong, in the eyes of Park Eugene's mother, was the most unacceptable thing that had ever walked into their family. She refused to acknowledge the marriage, Eugene said. His eyes were fixed on a point somewhere past Adeeze's shoulder, like looking directly at her was too hard. She wouldn't even say your name. As far as she was concerned, it didn't happen. But the debts happened. Eugene's gambling debts, 80 million won, accumulated over 2 years of bad decisions and worse luck, were real. The kind of debt that didn't go away quietly. The kind that sent men to your door. His mother made him an offer. She would pay the debts. All of them. In exchange, Adaeze had to disappear. The plan was simple, he said, and his voice cracked, just slightly, on the word simple, like it tasted bitter. Fake my death. Make it convincing, the sudden collapse. Pin the remaining debt on you, so you'd have reason to leave the country. Wait 1 year. Come back as someone else. Marry G1, my mother's choice, the daughter of a business associate, and secure the inheritance. He said it like he was reading from a script. Like the words were someone else's. Family name intact, Adaeze said, and her voice sounded very far away, even to herself. Yes. And you just went along with it. He finally looked at her. And in his eyes she saw something that she almost didn't believe. Shame. Raw, corrosive, the kind of shame that didn't wash off. She threatened you, he said. She said she would have you deported. Or worse. She had connections. People who could make things very difficult very fast. I thought. He swallowed. I thought if you believed I was dead, you would leave. You would go back to Lagos. You would be safe. Away from her, away from the debt, away from all of it. I thought. You thought. Adeeze's voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. You thought I would be safe. She leaned forward, and something in her face must have shifted, because he flinched, actually flinched, like she had raised a hand to him. Safe, she repeated. I was hunted by loan sharks in Lagos, Eugene. They showed up at my mother's house. They threatened her. My mother, who had nothing to do with any of this. I lost my job. I lost my apartment. I had nothing. I had nothing for 3 years. He reached across the table, a reflexive gesture, his hand moving toward hers before he could stop it. She pulled back so fast her chair scraped against the floor. I didn't know they'd follow you there, he said. My mother promised. Your mother is a monster. The words came out flat and certain, like a verdict. And you're a coward. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the cafe. Eugene sat very still. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just sat there, hands back on the table, and took it. Absorbed it the way you absorb a blow you know you deserve. And then, slowly, he looked up at her again. His eyes moved over her face. Slowly, carefully, the way they used to move over her in the mornings when they lay in bed and the light was coming through the curtains and neither of them wanted to get up. The way they moved when he was seeing her. Really seeing her. I know, he said. His voice was rough. Raw. I know what I am. But that night, our last night, I meant every word. Every single word I said to you. Every touch. He paused. I loved you, Adaeze. Loved, she said. Past tense. No. He shifted forward in his chair. The distance between them shrank. She could smell the cologne again, could feel the warmth radiating off him in the cool air of the cafe, and her body, traitor, responded to it the way it always had. A low, pulling heat somewhere beneath her ribs. I love you, he said. Present tense. I never stopped. She stood up. The chair scraped back. She was on her feet before she fully registered the decision to move, and she was looking down at him, and her voice, when it came, was breaking in a way she couldn't control and hated herself for. You have a wife in labor upstairs. I don't love her. But you married her. You put a baby in her. He stood too. He was close. Too close. The space between them suddenly charged with something electric and reckless and old. His eyes searched hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Because I couldn't have you, he said. They were inches apart. His hand lifted, slow, deliberate, and hovered beside her face, close enough that she could feel the heat of his palm against her cheek without him actually touching her. His fingers trembled. She should pull away. Every rational part of her, every part of her that had spent 3 years rebuilding itself from the rubble he had left behind, was screaming at her to step back, to put distance between them, to remember what he had done and what it had cost her. She didn't move. You don't get to touch me, she whispered. Not anymore. His hand stayed where it was. His eyes didn't leave hers. Then why, he said, barely a breath, are you still standing here? The answer hung between them, unspoken and devastating. Park Sung Minisesai. A nurse's voice, bright and urgent, cutting through the charged air like a blade. She was standing at the cafe entrance, slightly out of breath, her clipboard clutched to her chest. It's a girl. Come quickly. Your wife is asking for you. Eugene's eyes closed. Just for a moment. When they opened again, they were full of something that looked very much like pain. He looked at Adaeze one last time. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator, his stride quick and purposeful, and disappeared behind the closing doors without looking back. Adaeze stood alone in the nearly empty cafe, the untouched coffee going cold on the table behind her, and pressed her hand against her mouth to keep the sound inside. I still love him. God help me. I still love him. 3 days passed. 3 days of going back to the Goshawan room at night and lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the cafe scene in her mind on an endless loop. His hand, hovering beside her face. The way his voice had sounded when he said I love you. The way she hadn't moved away. 3 days of hating herself. On the morning of the 4th day, she dressed in black and took the subway to Gangnam. Eugene's father's funeral was being held at a traditional funeral hall on a quiet street near Daechi Station. One of those old money establishments with dark wooden doors and a courtyard full of white lanterns. The kind of place where grief was conducted with formality and grace. Adaeze had not been invited. She went anyway. The hall was full. Mourners in black hanboks and dark suits moved through the space in a slow, reverent choreography. Bowing, offering incense, exchanging quiet words. The air was thick with the sweet, smoky smell of burning sandalwood. Somewhere, a woman was crying in the low, measured way of someone who had been crying for days and was running out of tears. Adaeze stood at the back, near the entrance, half hidden by a stone pillar. She watched. Ji-won was there, beside Eugene, the baby. A girl, Adaeze had gathered from the Instagram posts that had appeared over the past 3 days, cradled in her arms in a white carrier. Ji-won looked composed, elegant, every strand of her hair in place. She played the role of grieving daughter-in-law with the same quiet, practiced grace that she seemed to bring to everything. And Eugene's mother, the architect, the puppet master, the woman who had orchestrated the destruction of Adaeze's life with the same cool efficiency one might use to plan a dinner party, presided over the whole affair from a chair near the front, dressed in immaculate black silk, her face arranged in an expression of dignified sorrow that Adaeze suspected had been practiced in front of a mirror. Eugene moved through the ceremony like a man underwater, greeting guests, bowing, accepting condolences with a nod and a murmured Gamsahamnida. He was performing, Adaeze realized, doing exactly what was expected of him. The dutiful son. The responsible heir. And then his eyes found her. It happened during a pause between groups of mourners, a gap in the flow, a moment when he turned and his gaze swept the back of the hall, and landed on her and stayed. For a long, charged second, neither of them moved. Then something flickered across his face. Not surprise. He had known she might come. Something more like resignation. And underneath it, something that looked desperately like hope. She held his gaze for 3 full beats. Then she turned and walked outside. The courtyard was cool and empty, the white lanterns swaying gently in the evening breeze. Adaeze leaned against the stone wall and waited. She didn't have to wait long. He appeared at the door 5 minutes later, pulling off his jacket and draping it over one arm. He looked, up close, exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tiredness that sleep couldn't touch. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Neither should you." She tilted her head. "At least, not with that name." Something tightened in his jaw. He glanced back toward the hall, then stepped closer, lowering his voice. "What do you want from me?" "Money. I'll pay every cent of the debt. I can arrange." "I don't want your money." "Then what?" She stepped closer to him. Into the space where the air between them always seemed to crackle, always seemed to charge. She watched his pupils dilate, watched the involuntary physical response to her proximity, the way his body recognized hers the same way hers recognized his, regardless of everything that had happened between them. "I want you to feel what I felt," she said, and her voice was low and steady and utterly calm. "I want you to know what it's like to lose everything." His face went very still. "I'm going to tell G1, Adaeze continued. "Tonight. About us. About the fake death. About the debts your mother pinned on me. About all of it." "Adaeze." He moved toward her, his hand closing around her arm. Not hard but firm, urgent. "Please. You can't. You took 3 years of my life." She didn't pull away. She let him hold her arm, let him feel how steady she was, how certain. "You made me a ghost. Now it's your turn." He was staring at her like she was something he couldn't look away from. Like she was the only real thing in the world. And then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. He pulled her against him. Hard, sudden. His arm around her waist and his mouth on hers. And the kiss was nothing like the soft, careful kisses of their marriage. It was desperate. Hungry. 3 years of everything they hadn't said and hadn't done and hadn't been allowed to feel, compressed into a single, devastating point of contact. She kissed him back. She kissed him back with her hands fisted in his shirt and her nails digging into his shoulders hard enough to leave marks, and the fury and the grief and the want were all tangled together, inseparable, a single raw current running through both of them. 3 years of mourning a man who wasn't dead. 3 years of debt and fear and loneliness and the slow, grinding work of rebuilding a life from nothing. All of it poured into this one kiss, against this wall, in this courtyard full of white lanterns, while inside, his mother and his other wife and his newborn daughter waited. They broke apart, breathing hard. His forehead dropped against hers. His eyes were closed. "I hate you," she said. Her voice was wrecked. "I know," he whispered. "I hate that I still want you. I know." Footsteps. They sprang apart. Instinctive, automatic, the movement of 2 people who had spent enough time together to know when they were about to be caught. Adaeze's back hit the stone wall. Eugene turned, smoothing down his shirt, but it was too late. G1 stood at the end of the courtyard, in the doorway between the hall and the outside, the baby sleeping in her arms. Her face was perfectly composed. Her eyes moved from Eugene to Adaeze and back again, and something shifted behind them, not shock. Something colder. Something that looked, almost like confirmation. "Sungmin," she said very quietly. "Who is this?" G1 did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She did not do any of the things that Adaeze, in the raw, adrenaline-soaked seconds that followed, half expected her to do. Instead, she looked at Eugene with an expression of such composed, absolute calm that it was somehow more unsettling than any amount of screaming would have been. And then she said, "Should we talk somewhere private?" They found a small room at the back of the funeral hall. A storage space, really, repurposed with a few chairs and a low table, the kind of room that existed in every large building for exactly these kinds of conversations. G1 carried the baby in. settled into one of the chairs with the practiced ease of someone who had been doing this for days, and placed the carrier on the table beside her. The baby slept on, utterly undisturbed by the fact that her mother's marriage was about to end. Eugene sat in the chair farthest from Ji-won, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped in front of him. He looked like a man who had been waiting for this moment and dreading it in equal measure. Adaeze remained standing. Ji-won looked at her. Not with hostility, not with jealousy, with something that was almost curiosity. "You're the Nigerian wife," she said. It was not a question. Adaeze blinked. The certainty in Ji-won's voice, the complete, unsurprised matter-of-factness of it, knocked her sideways in a way that nothing else had. Not the airport. Not the cafe. Not the kiss. "You knew," Adaeze said. Ji-won nodded. "Once, precisely. I've known for 6 months. Since I found the marriage certificate in his office at home. I went looking for the insurance documents. His father was ill, I needed the paperwork, and there it was. In a folder. With your name on it." She glanced at Eugene. He had gone very still, the way a man goes still when the ground has already given way beneath him and there is nowhere left to fall. "Ji-won," he started. "Don't." She held up one hand. Not sharply. Tiredly. The gesture of someone who had already rehearsed this conversation in her mind and was now simply performing it. She turned back to Adaeze. "I want you to understand something," she said. "I am not stupid. And I am not in love with him." The words landed in the small room like stones dropped into water. Adaeze stared at her. "Then why?" she began. "Because my father owed his mother money." Ji-won's voice was even, clinical, stripped of emotion the way a legal document is stripped of emotion. "A business debt. Significant. The arrangement was this: I marry Park Sung-min." She didn't look at Eugene when she said the name, and the deliberateness of that omission was its own kind of violence. "And in exchange, my father's debt is settled. I get financial security. A good name. A comfortable life. He gets the inheritance his mother controls. Love was never part of the equation." She looked at Eugene then. And the expression on her face was not anger. It was disgust, clean and precise, the way you might look at something you had stepped in without meaning to. "But I didn't know he had destroyed someone to get here," she said, still looking at him. "I didn't know about the fake death. The debts he pinned on someone else. I didn't know any of that until I found the certificate, and even then." She stopped, drew a breath, redirected her gaze to Adaeze. "How much does he owe you?" 50 million won, Adaeze said. "Plus 3 years of my life." The number sat in the air between them. Ji-won absorbed it with a single, slow nod, the way you nod when a number confirms what you already suspected. Then she stood up. She picked up the baby carrier, the strap settling naturally over one shoulder, and she looked at Eugene one last time. "I want a divorce," she said. Her voice was very quiet, very final. "You can keep the inheritance. I don't want it. I'll take the settlement my father negotiated. That's enough for me and for her." A slight tilt of her head toward the sleeping baby. "And you?" She turned to Adaeze. Something shifted in Ji-won's face. Something that was almost, not quite warmth, but something adjacent to it. Recognition, maybe. The look of one woman seeing another woman clearly, for the first time. "You deserve better than him," she said. "But if you want him." She glanced back at Eugene. "He's yours." She walked out of the room without waiting for a response. The door closed behind her with a soft, decisive click. The silence that followed was enormous. Adaeze and Eugene sat in it, or rather, she stood in it and he sat in it, and neither of them moved for a long time. The baby's carrier was gone. Ji-won was gone. The room felt suddenly very small and very empty, like a stage after the last actor has exited. "I don't want you," Adaeze said. Her voice cracked on the last word. She couldn't help it. The tears came without permission, sudden, hot, furious, and she turned her face away and pressed her hand against her mouth and tried to breathe through the tightness in her chest. "Yes, you do," Eugene said. His voice was rough, broken. She turned back to look at him and found that he was crying too, quietly, without drama, the tears simply falling down his face the way they do when a person has been holding everything in for too long and there is nothing left to hold it with. "I know," he said. "I know what I did. I know what it cost you. And I know you have every reason to walk out of this room and never speak to me again." He wiped his face with the back of his hand. A gesture so simple, so unguarded, that it made her chest ache. "But I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Not this time." It was past 11 when Adaeze left the funeral hall. The street outside was quiet, the hush of a wealthy Gangnam neighborhood at night, the kind of silence that was less an absence of sound and more a deliberate suppression of it. The white lanterns had been taken down. The mourners had gone home. The building behind her was dark. She was halfway to the subway station when the black car pulled up beside her. It was a Genesis, not the SUV from the airport, but a sedan, sleek and dark and expensive, the kind of car that said money without needing to shout about it. It slowed to a crawl beside her, matching her pace, and the rear window lowered with a smooth electric hiss. Park Eugene's mother sat in the back seat. She was a small woman, 72 years old, impeccably dressed in black silk, her silver hair swept back from a face that was still, even after all these years, striking in its sharpness. Her eyes were dark and very dry and looked at Adaeze the way a surgeon looks at a problem, with precision and without sentiment. "Get in," she said. It was not a request. Adaeze got in. The interior of the car smelled of leather and something else. Expensive perfume, the kind that was subtle enough to be almost imperceptible but persistent enough to linger. The mother didn't speak immediately. She waited until the car had pulled smoothly back into traffic, until the streets of Gangnam were sliding past the tinted windows in a blur of light and shadow, and then she turned to Adaeze with an expression of perfect, practiced composure. "How much do you want to disappear?" she asked. The directness of it was almost impressive. No pleasantries. No preamble. Just the transaction laid bare, the way this woman had apparently been conducting business her entire life. Adaeze looked at her. At the silk dress. At the diamonds at her ears. At the hands folded in her lap. Manicured, still, utterly calm. "I'm not disappearing," Adaeze said. Something flickered in the mother's eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or the beginning of it. 100 million won, she said. Cash. Deposited wherever you choose. You leave Korea. You annul the marriage. I have lawyers who can handle it quietly, within the week. And you never contact my son again. 100 million won. The number landed in Adaeze's mind and sat there, heavy and bright, like a gold coin. It was more money than she had ever seen. More money than her mother had seen. More money than she could have earned in years, decades, at Mama Titi's, chopping vegetables and plating jollof rice for 12,000 won an hour. She could disappear with that money. She could go back to Lagos and buy her mother a house. She could open a restaurant. She could build a life that was entirely, completely her own. She should take it. Every practical, survival-oriented part of her brain was screaming at her to take it. She looked at the mother, at the cool, calculating eyes, at the thin, satisfied set of the mouth, at the woman who had orchestrated the destruction of Adaeze's life as casually as one might arrange flowers, and she felt something settle in her chest. Something quiet and hard and immovable. Something that had been building for 3 years without her fully realizing it. It felt like pride. "No," she said. The mother's eyebrows rose. "Just slightly. Just enough. Excuse me. You don't get to buy me." Adaeze's voice was steady, calm. The calmness of someone who had already made peace with everything that was about to happen. Not again. A beat of silence. The car hummed along the road. Outside, the lights of Gangnam streamed past, beautiful and indifferent. "Then what?" the mother said, in a voice that was very, very cold. "Do you want?" Adaeze reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She didn't unlock it. She simply held it up, screen facing the mother, and let the silence do the work. "I'm going to the press," she said. "I'm going to tell them everything. The fake death. The bigamy. The debts you pinned on a woman who had nothing to do with them. I have the marriage certificate. I have bank records. I have photographs." She paused. "Let that sink in. And I have a recording of your son confessing to all of it." It was a bluff. There was no recording. Eugene had never known she was listening, had never spoken the words into anything that could be captured and played back. But the mother didn't know that. The mother only knew what Adaeze chose to let her see. The mother looked at the phone. Looked at Adaeze. Something shifted behind her eyes. The first crack in the composure. The first sign that the ground was moving beneath her. "You have no proof," she said. But her voice had changed. The coldness was still there, but beneath it, something else was stirring. Something that sounded almost like calculation. "Try me," Adaeze said. Another silence. Longer this time. The car turned a corner. The streetlights changed from gold to white. "What do you want?" the mother asked again. And this time, the question was different. This time, it was real. Adaeze lowered the phone. She looked at the woman who had destroyed her life, and she told her exactly what she wanted. 200 million won, she said. Paid directly to me. Not through lawyers, not through accounts. To me, in my name, documented and clean. A public apology, not to me personally, but to the record. A public apology, not to me personally, but to the record. An acknowledgement that the debts were not mine. And you leave me and Eugene alone. Forever. No interference. No conditions. No more. The mother stared at her for a long time. He's married to G1, she said at last. The word sounded almost reflexive, a move in a game she was realizing, slowly, she had already lost. Not for long. The silence that followed was the longest one yet. The car moved through the night. Seoul glittered past the windows, indifferent and enormous. A city of 10 million lives that did not care, even slightly, about the negotiation happening in the back of this sedan. Then the mother nodded. Once. Done, she said. Adaeze held the woman's gaze for one more moment, long enough to make sure the message was received, long enough to let the weight of what had just happened settle into the space between them. Then she reached for the door handle. Stop the car, she said. The car stopped. Adaeze stepped out onto the pavement. The night air was cool against her face. Behind her, the sedan idled, the tinted windows still open, the mother's silhouette visible in the back seat like a figure in an old painting. Adaeze didn't look back. She walked. Seoul in February was cold, a dry, sharp cold that cut through layers and settled into your bones and stayed there, no matter how many cups of coffee you drank or how tightly you wound your scarf. But Hongang Park was beautiful in it. The river was gray and wide and very still, reflecting the white sky like a mirror, and the bare trees along the path stood in their dark, skeletal rows with a kind of austere grace that made the whole landscape look like something out of a painting. Adaeze sat on a bench near the water and watched the river. It had been a year. 12 months, almost to the day, since she had walked out of that car on a Gangnam Street and felt, for the first time in a very long time, like herself. Like the person she had been before Eugene, before Seoul, before the debts and the fake death and the slow, grinding machinery of someone else's cruelty had ground her down to almost nothing. 200 million won sat in her bank account. Clean. Documented. Hers. The debt was cleared, officially, legally, completely. The Korean lawyer who had originally lured her back to Seoul had, in a twist of irony so neat it almost felt staged, been the one to draw up the settlement paperwork. Adaeze suspected the mother had arranged it. She didn't care. The result was the same. The loan sharks were gone. The threats were over. The shadow that had followed her from Lagos to Seoul and back again had simply, quietly, disappeared. She had a new apartment. Small, but with windows. Real windows, that let in light and air and the sound of the city. She had good furniture. She had a kitchen she actually enjoyed cooking in. She had, for the first time in years, enough money to breathe. She was free. The footsteps behind her were quiet, careful, almost tentative, the way you approach someone you're not sure will want to see you. Adaeze didn't turn around. She already knew who it was. She had been expecting him, in the way you expect weather, not with certainty about the exact timing, but with a deep, bone-level knowledge that it was coming. "I thought I'd find you here," Eugene said. He sat down beside her on the bench. Not close, a careful distance, the kind of distance that said, "I know I don't have the right to be close to you." He was dressed simply, dark jeans, a grey coat, a scarf wound loosely around his neck. He looked different. Thinner, still. But the shadows under his eyes were lighter. The set of his shoulders was looser. He looked, Adaeze thought, like a man who was slowly, carefully, learning how to exist without the weight of everything he'd been carrying. "Divorce finalized?" she asked, still looking at the river. "Last week. And your mother?" A pause. "Cut me off. Disowned me. Completely." Adaeze nodded. She had expected that too. "Good," she said. The word sat between them, blunt, unadorned, exactly what she meant. Eugene didn't flinch from it. He simply received it, the way he had received everything she had said to him since the airport. Like he understood that this was what he had earned. Like he knew there was no shortcut through it. "I'm sorry," he said. "For everything." "I know it doesn't." "It doesn't," she said. Quietly. Simply. "The way you close a door." But she didn't move away from him. She stayed exactly where she was, on the bench, watching the river, and let the silence between them be what it was. Not comfortable exactly, but not hostile either. Something in between. Something that was, perhaps, the very beginning of something new. "I got a job," he said, after a while. His voice was quieter now. Slightly sheepish, in the way of someone offering something small and hoping it will be enough. "Teaching English. At a hagwon in Mapogu. It's not much money. But it's honest work." Adaeze turned her head to look at him. He was staring at the river, his hands in his pockets, his jaw tight with the effort of not looking back at her. "Proud of you," she said. It came out half sarcastic, half sincere, and she meant both halves, which was the strangest thing. She was proud of him. Genuinely. Not because teaching English at a hagwon was glamorous or impressive, but because it was real. Because it was the first thing he had done, in all the time she had known him, that was entirely, completely his own. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "Or another chance. I just..." He swallowed. "I wanted you to know I'm trying. To be better. To be the man you deserved. The man I should have been from the start." Adaeze looked at him for a long time. At his face, which she knew better than almost any other face in the world. Every line of it, every expression, every tell. She looked at the man who had broken her, and she saw, underneath all of it, underneath the guilt and the shame and the years of silence, someone who was genuinely, painfully trying to change. She wasn't sure if that was enough. She wasn't sure it would ever be enough. But it was a start. "You broke me," she said. "I know. And I'm still not whole. I know." She turned back to the river. The water moved slowly, grey and cold and continuous, carrying whatever it carried toward the sea without pause or hesitation. Then she stood up. "I'm going to Busan next week," she said. "Opening a restaurant." Eugene looked up at her. The surprise on his face was real, genuine, unguarded, the first expression she had seen from him in months that wasn't filtered through guilt or caution. "That's..." He blinked. Shook his head, slightly. "That's amazing, Adaeze." She looked down at him. At the man on the bench, in the winter light, with the river behind him and the bare trees casting their shadows across the path. And she felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness, not exactly. Something more tentative than that. Something that was less about what he had done and more about what might, possibly, come next. There's a sous chef position, she said. If you're interested. He stared at her. Are you? He started and stopped. His mouth opened and closed again, and for a moment he looked exactly like the man she had first met on that dating app 4 years ago. Slightly stunned, slightly disbelieving, as though he had just been offered something he had long since stopped believing he deserved. I'm not saying I forgive you, Adaeze said. She held up one hand, forestalling whatever he was about to say. I'm not saying we're getting back together. I'm not saying any of that. She paused. Let the words settle. I'm saying maybe we start over. As strangers. And see what happens. He stood up slowly, like a man rising from a dream. He looked at her. Really looked, the way he used to look at her in the mornings, in the light, like she was something that had surprised him. Something that had made the world bigger. Okay, he said. Very quietly. Okay. They stood there, on the path beside the river, in the cold February air, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then Adaeze started walking, slowly, along the path, toward the park exit and the subway and the rest of the afternoon. After a beat, Eugene fell into step beside her. Not close. Not touching. But close enough that their arms, if they had chosen to, could have brushed. They walked in silence for a while. The river moved beside them. The bare trees stood in their rows. Seoul carried on around them, enormous and indifferent and alive. What's your real name, anyway? Adaeze asked, after a while. Her voice was light. Almost playful. The first time it had sounded like that in a very long time. Eugene glanced at her. And then, slowly, carefully, like someone testing whether it was safe to smile, he smiled. Park Eugene, he said. She nodded. Looked ahead, at the path stretching out before them. Long and open and unfinished. Nice to meet you, Eugene, she said. I'm Adaeze. Nice to meet you, he said. They kept walking. Some loves die. Some loves are reborn. And some loves get a second chance to start from scratch.